Portman, are you available by WebEx?
I am, Mr. Chairman. Thank you. I've been moving around the Capitol as we've had to vote, but I was at the hearing earlier, and I appreciate the witnesses and all the information we've received. And, as I look at this issue and even watch some of the back and forth today between our colleagues, it seems to me that pulling this out of politics a little bit and having a bipartisan group that is more independent look at the issue is a good idea, in part because most of us don't believe that this ought to be something that the federal government usurps from the states. In fact, we believe that the Constitution got it right, and that generally speaking, it's better to have the states handle this. But there are obviously many disparities between how the states do it. So there was discussion earlier, I think it was of the Carter-Baker Commission. I would ask you, Mr. Starr, is this time for us to establish a commission? I've been involved in some of these commissions. I've been a commissioner and co-chaired some that have worked, some that haven't worked. But often they can be quite effective at sort of taking the partisan poison out of an issue and addressing it in a very straightforward way. If you had a distinguished Democrat and a distinguished Republican and commissioners who are dedicated to increasing the confidence in our elections, do you think now is the time for us to establish such a commission that could report with plenty of time before the next midterm election and help to give the states a sense of direction and perhaps even a template of best practices?
The short answer is yes. In light of the acrimony and the division with respect to the 2000 election, bringing together Jimmy Carter and former Secretary of State Baker was, I think, very efficacious. They made thoughtful recommendations, but they bring attention and shed light on what the issues are. And so, yes, I think taking it out of what is clearly continuing to be a highly bitter and acrimonious discussion, and to say to the American people, we're going to take a look at this, and we're going to try to, in fact, improve in the great spirit of reform. We want honest elections. Abraham Lincoln, the subject of the fraudulent mail-in campaign. Let's not lose sight, even though I'm thankful that foreign interference and so forth, and I very much admire Mr. Krebs and all that. But we're really talking about down in the boiler room, so to speak, of American elections. And that's where I think these reforms need to be and safeguards need to be in place.
Well, thank you for that. And I'm looking forward to working with one of my Democratic colleagues to try to promote this idea. We've had some discussions of it already. And I think, again, today, what we've heard is indicative of the degree of intensity on this issue and the need for free and fair elections. I think everybody agrees with secure elections, absolutely. And you mentioned Mr. Krebs. Chris, thank you for your service at CISA. I agree with what was said earlier about the fact that during your time there, you were instrumental in building up our defenses on the cybersecurity side. Particularly, thank you for working with Ohio Secretary of State Frank LaRose so well. Frank LaRose and you, I think, we're able to provide some examples for other states, as I understand it. You can speak to that. But we have in every county in Ohio the so-called Albert Intrusion Detection Monitoring hardware, which is designed to detect suspicious cyber activity. Can you comment briefly on the benefits of using this kind of detection and monitoring hardware and how it worked?
Yes, sir. First off, I want to thank you for actually just the state of Ohio. For some reason, in my senior staff in my front office, two of my top 3 advisors happen to be from Ohio. So you're doing something right there. The Albert systems are intrusion detection.
I'm going to put on my mask after you said that, since Harper had his Ohio mask on earlier.
So the Albert systems are intrusion detection systems that effectively sit on the network, sit on the wire, that capture traffic, that we can work with our intelligence community partners and develop what's known as signatures, looking for known malicious activity or known interaction with suspicious IP addresses, just looking for bad interaction. And it gives us a good insight into what sort of behaviors may be happening on those networks. And they are actually pretty key after the 2016 election. Once we were able to get a sense of what was happening in Illinois, we could load up some of those signatures and then go do forensics. It is a passive system. It's a forensic system. Where we need to go, though, is building on the trust we've developed through the Albert sensors and through the ISAC and through the coordinating councils is start deploying more advanced technologies. And I'm specifically talking about some of the endpoint detection and response capabilities that'll actually sit on a computer in a state and local office and be more of a real-time monitoring and mitigation capability. That's how we continue moving forward. We need the same capability in the federal government. We're not there yet, but we have to continue advancing. And I think Congress.
Well,
I'll stop.
Yeah, Chris, again, as you know, you and I've talked about this. I appreciate what you did for elections. I also am very concerned that our federal government is not up to the task generally. And that's another topic for another hearing, perhaps one where you'll be back to testify. But look what's happened just recently. In the last week, we found out that a very sophisticated group of hackers got into the computers of some of our most sensitive agencies. And so we obviously have a lot of work to do. And I'm not suggesting that CISA was at fault there. But on the other hand, I think we have not yet given even CISA adequate resources and authority to be able to handle all these issues, not just the election issues. But obviously, we have a huge problem right now with cyber attacks, and we don't know all the details yet. And I won't ask you to get into stuff you don't know about, but it was a massive cyber attack on federal agencies that undercut our national security. We know that. By the way, Senator Paul earlier talked about the fact that there has been some lack of understanding between what you testified to and what you stated as to the election being secure from cyber attacks, and this notion that there were not instances of irregularity and fraud in this election, which of course there have been in every election in the history of our country, and there were in this election, and we've heard about some of those today. Is Senator Paul correct? And I guess I would slightly amend what he said. He said that your focus was just on foreign adversaries. My sense is your focus was not just on foreign adversaries, although you feel fairly confident that that did not happen this time. And obviously, based on what happened in 2016 with the Russians, this is good news. But also with regard to domestic cyber attacks, is that what your report was about? Is he accurate in saying that?
Yes, sir. So, when you come into federal office, you pledge the oath to uphold and defend the Constitution from threats, foreign and domestic, and that's what we did. The focus of the statement, the joint statement, was security. It was secure. I think terms have been conflated here, alleging that we were speaking to the fraud aspect. We absolutely were not. We were talking about security, hacking, manipulation of these machines. That was the thrust of the statement.
Yeah, I think that's very important to point out. And I think a number of people were confused about that, including perhaps some folks in the administration. Post-election, there's been a lot of talk about signature matching. And I'll end with this, Mr. Chairman. I know we're getting over time here. But in Ohio, what we do is, and we've been doing this for 15 years quite successfully, we send out an application for an absentee ballot. It's then a no-fault absentee. That's how I vote. But you have to send in an application including a signature. Those signatures are checked. Then the signature on the actual ballot, once you receive the ballot, you send that in. You have another signature, that's checked. And then, of course, the two are compared. They also, in Ohio, have access to other signatures if there is some confusion as to whether it might be the right person or not. Could you, Mr. Krebs, or others, perhaps comment on that system? Is that a good way to ensure that you have the protection that we all want to have, that the person who requested the ballot is an eligible voter, and that the return ballot was completed by that same person?
Not an expert on the system. Seems reasonable to me.
Anybody else want to comment on that?
Sir, this is State Representative Frank Ryan. I would tell you that is a good system, and that would alleviate a significant number of the concerns that I had in the election. And based upon some of the comments that were made by many of the senators and the testifiers, I would indicate that we saw a major problem with the dot-com bubble in 2001, which led to the Sarbanes-Oxley bill, much of which is the basis of my testimony today. Then in 2008 and 2009, we had the crisis that happened in the banking industry with the no documentation loans. We saw how that worked. That led to the Dodd-Frank bill. I would hope that would happen in 2000 elections and in the Abraham Lincoln election, in this most recent one in 2016 and 2020, there would be similar legislation that could help us restore the confidence that people have that there's some degree of uniform perspective about the requirements that each of the states needs to be able to comply with. What Ohio is doing would have alleviated a major amount of the concerns I had when we had a Supreme Court that decided to legislate from the bench.
And Mr. Chairman, if I may say just a word, and that is, I think what Senator Portman, you have identified is a best practice. And it certainly qualifies as one of the things that perhaps a commission, if one is founded, could say, we have canvassed the entire 50 states, and here are the best practices. The recommendations could be based on experience as opposed to simply theoretical constructs. Let's just see what has worked in the various states with reputations for honesty and integrity.
Yeah, that would be the objective. Thank you, Mr. Darn. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for your indulgence.